Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about something that happens often, but parents aren't warned about it enough. And I often, when I'm talking to therapists, I'll say it's really important that we let parents know that when kids start working on OCD, and that means whether you as the parent are starting to work on OCD with your child independently, or they're with good treatment, sometimes things get worse before they get better. And that is really confusing to parents. So I always tell therapists, it's important to give a parent a heads up, because that's one of the big questions that I get from parents inside the AT parenting community is we're starting to do the things that the therapist is telling us to do and things are getting worse. Do we have the wrong therapist? And a lot of times when they have the right therapist, it's because of the things we're going to talk about today in this episode. And so it's not necessarily an indication that you have the wrong therapist, especially if you have a therapist that, well, in the AT parenting community that I help you find, or that's a colleague of mine that's trained in OCD, that is doing exposure response prevention, which is the type of therapy we're looking for. When things like that are happening, it's not necessarily the therapist. So we're going to break down and demystify what that looks like, why that happens, and how you as the parent can support your child through that. But before we jump in, I do want to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they're available in the US and outside the US. You can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is a right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That's treatmyocd.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. Also, I want to give you a heads up that my online school, AT Parenting Survival School, at atparentingsurvivalschool.com. It's a very original URL. I have not raised my pricing on my online school since I created it back in 2017. That's crazy. And actually, I think the school opened in 2016. So it has been 10 years that I've been running this online school for on-demand courses, and it's grown since I started it back in 2016. We have my foundational courses like how to teach kids to crush OCD. I have a space course. I have how to teach kids to crush anxiety. I have how to handle difficult behavior caused by anxiety and OCD. I have how to handle sleep struggles caused by anxiety and OCD. I've just tried to make as many different courses as I could to support you. I know there's a lot of parents out there who either can't afford therapy or don't have access to the right therapist, or their child's not willing to go to a therapist. I also created recently Crushing OCD Kids and Teens course. And so that is a course that's directly for your kid or your teen so that they can learn how to crush OCD independently of you. And the How to Teach Kids to Crush OCD course is different than the kids course. I go over different things. I teach it in a different way. And actually in the kid and teen course, I have kids and teens with me teaching me. And so you hear directly from them and their experience. But I'm telling you all this because all my courses are going up. I have not changed the prices. I guess it's been 10 years. And even when I first started, people were like, whoa, I charged a lot less than everybody else. And even when I'm increasing the pricing, I've heard people say, why are you just increasing it that small amount? But the pricing will go up on March 1st. And so I want to give you a heads up so that you have some awareness in case you want to grab any courses or workshops before that happens. And so this is coming out on February 17th. And that gives you, if you're listening to this in real time, about a week and a half to look at my online store, I don't know why I said that, my online school, and see if there's anything that you want to get now or that you've been on the fence for, because March 1st, the pricing will go up. So let's jump into today's topic. which is, why does progress make things worse sometimes? Well, I want to start with how OCD works in general. OCD likes to be private. It likes to be in cahoots with the person it is tormenting. It doesn't want to be in the light. And so when your child, and when I say child, I mean child, teen, adult, your adult child, it doesn't matter. It's just the language I'm using. But anybody with OCD, when you start to call OCD out of the darkness and you're putting a spotlight on it, it doesn't like that. And so it increases the volume. It turns up the volume because OCD is in a panic. Stop talking about me. Let me shut this down. And so it is very common when you just start talking about OCD, or the therapist starts talking about OCD, that symptoms increase. That doesn't mean that it's a bad thing to talk about. In fact, the ultimate goal is that we can shake that boat. We can rock that boat as aggressively as we want, and OCD has no bark back. If we're walking on eggshells and we're tiptoeing around OCD permanently because we don't want to upset OCD or we don't want to trigger OCD, that's not crushing OCD. The way that we crush OCD is to throw it into the light and say, we're going to talk about it, we're going to work on it, we're going to crush it. And when kids are told by OCD, and sometimes it's a compulsion, OCD will say, if you talk about your OCD, then I'm going to make something bad happen. It's like a mafia boss. It's very threatening. And so sometimes our kids are not communicative about their struggles because there's literally a threat that their brain is telling them that if they speak this out loud, something bad's going to happen. For other kids, it's embarrassing, or they feel a lot of shame around their intrusive thoughts. And so they don't want to talk about it. And so when they do, OCD's like, I told you shouldn't say anything. They probably think you're crazy now. So there's a lot of backlash that people get when they start to go into a healthy approach of crushing OCD. So that's important to recognize that does happen. It doesn't mean that we want to force talking about OCD onto our kids. I think I just need to have that caveat here before we move on, because I don't want you to be like, well, Natasha said that we should still talk about it and we're not going to walk on eggshells and we're going to rock the boat aggressively at their pace, with their lead, right? We're not forcing this stuff on them, but it's important for you to know that the ultimate goal is for them to be able to communicate and work on it, and we don't walk on eggshells. So another thing I want to talk about is when you start doing exposure response prevention, ERP, which is a type of cognitive behavioral therapy that is the first line treatment approach for OCD. So it is, if you have a therapist who says that they do CBT, and you're like, oh, well, they do CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and ERP, exposure response prevention, is a type of cognitive behavioral therapy, and they say they treat OCD, so we must be all good. No, don't fall for that. It's really important that you as the parent know that when a therapist says, I do CBT, that they're not talking about ERP unless they specifically say ERP. So a follow-up question when you're looking for an OCD therapist, if they say, yes, I treat OCD, yes, I treat it with CBT, my follow-up question is, do you do ERP? Don't assume because ERP is a type of CBT that they're talking about ERP, because more often than not, they're not talking about it. Because when you're an OCD therapist, you don't just say, I do CBT. You're very clear because you've had the training and you know that it's important to emphasize that you do ERP. And so when kids are doing ERP, exposure response prevention, the whole idea of ERP is to systematically and slowly and collaboratively expose the person to an OCD trigger without them doing their compulsion. That's the RP, the response prevention. And the idea is that they build up tolerance for the discomfort. That is the ultimate goal, is that they're learning how to sit in the discomfort. OCD is we're not going to get into the neuroscience of it, but OCD has to do with misfiring of the circuitry in the brain. And the person is getting a false signal that says either something is not done, not complete. So that's why you see the repetitiveness in compulsions. Also, that alert center of something is wrong, something is not okay. They're getting a false message, regardless of what that message is. They're getting a false message. And the way to override that message in the brain is to go to the OCD gym, trigger that thought or feeling on purpose, and sit with the discomfort without doing the loop, which is the compulsion, which is the thing OCD says to do or avoid to get that brief relief. That's where they get sucked in. I don't know why I just ended it with sucked. And then I was like, there's another word there, Natasha, continue. Sucked in. That's how they get sucked in. I don't know why I did that. And so when we disrupt the loop, that is where the progress is made, because they train their brain that they can handle those misfirings, that wrong messaging, that error code, whatever you want to think of it as, because it's different depending on what intrusive thought or feeling they're getting. But when they learn how to sit with that, when they get those error messages, there's not as much panic. They are able to resist the demand, the compulsion that OCD wants them to do, whether that is mental, physical, involving you as a compulsive reassurance question. They're able to sit and not scratch the itch because they're building their OCD muscles. That's hard. That's hard. Think about something that is overwhelming for you, and then imagine doing it on purpose and then just sitting with the uncomfortable feeling. We can all relate to this on some level. And that is really hard. And so it does increase symptoms initially in different ways. Your child might look more stressed. They might have more compulsions, because OCD doesn't just sit back and say, that's great, build those muscles to tolerate me. No, OCD is like, what is happening here? Now I'm going to pop up all these different themes and all these different things. And maybe you did an exposure in the office, and now I'm going to make you do compulsions all night to make you pay for that. That does happen. That doesn't mean that ERP is not working. It just means that you're building muscle. It's kind of, for me, it's kind of like when I go and do Pilates. I always talk about Pilates, but it doesn't always feel good in the moment. And it doesn't even feel good the night of. Sometimes I'm sore a few hours later. And definitely sometimes when I first started, I was sore for a couple of days afterwards. And if I just took it on face value, I would say, this is hurting my body. Why am I doing this? I do this thing that's supposed to be healthy for me, quote unquote, and I'm sore for 2 days. It's like I'm purposely injuring myself. But intellectually, I know that's not true. I know that that's the body building muscle so that I can tolerate more weight and more exercise and more strenuous activity the next time, and rinse and repeat, and the next time. And it's very similar. We're teaching the brain to be able to handle the discomfort and to handle whatever that glitch is throwing at them so they can override it easier and easier. So yeah, it gets harder first. You might see a more anxious kid. Their anxiety might spike. That's all part of the process. Now, when you are pulling back as a parent and you're saying, I'm not going to feed the OCD anymore, and maybe you do a space approach. So Ellie Leibovitz created the space program, which is teaching parents how to systematically pull back their enabling of OCD. And you can go to spacetreatment.net and you can get a space provider. If you go to my online school, and you like my style of teaching, I created a space study guide course so that I teach you in my style, and I created my own worksheets just to weave his approach in a simple form. Actually, I had a lot of parents in the AT parenting community ask me to do that, and I created it initially for them and gave it to them. They have free access to that inside the AT parenting community. But then I thought other parents might actually like this too. So I put it in my online school, which it is there, and it's discounted for now until, well, it's not discounted. The price is going up. But maybe you're following the space program where you are systematically following these steps to pull back your enabling of OCD. Well, that doesn't go smoothly. And a lot of times that also makes OCD very angry, and you'll see an extinction burst. And an extinction burst is kind of like the volume goes all the way up before it goes all the way down. And that is almost like a game of chicken with your child, because it reminds me of, getting my child to sleep in their own bedroom, and just the struggle of, inchworming my way out of their room so that they could believe in themselves and know that they can tolerate a little bit of space between us. Or I remember, my daughter being really anxious about going to birthday parties because she has emetophobia, the fear of throwing up. And it was very triggered by being at parties and social situations, and getting her to go there, like us inchworming our way there, at every step being like, you don't have to go in, but we're going to just go to the parking lot. You don't have to go in, but we're just going to do this. And doing it in a slow and systematic way is really important. But it gets loud, like the baby gets loud before the baby stops crying. It also reminds me of the 2-year-old when you are checking out at the register and they see candy or they see something they want and they're like a puddle on the floor. And I hated that developmental phase where you're like, I just have to ride this out because no means no. And I don't want to give them the candy, because if I do, then they're going to just realize that every time they have a meltdown and just fall to the floor, that they get what they want and they get candy. OCD does that. OCD has a toddler tantrum, which we call in the therapy world an extinction burst. And so a lot of times parents will say, I don't think me pulling back and not participating in their OCD compulsion is helping, because one, my child is literally telling me, this isn't helping me. Yes, they will say that because they're feeling overwhelmed. OCD is saying that. OCD is desperate. OCD doesn't feel like this is a good choice because it's crushing OCD. And a lot of times parents don't see it as feeding and participating in an OCD compulsion. They think it's helping their child. And so they'll often say, it just feels really bad not helping them. And I'm like, you washing down the counter because OCD is demanding that you wash it for the 3rd time is not helping them. It's helping their OCD. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean we stop doing everything cold turkey, because that's too much on a person. I'm talking about them, not you. It is too much on both of us, though. You do it slowly and systematically, but it doesn't go smoothly typically no matter what. And so that doesn't mean that you pulling back accommodations is a bad thing when it comes to OCD. The more a parent accommodates OCD, the more OCD grows, 100%. Research has shown that. I have seen that in my practice for 2 decades. That will happen. But we have to do it slowly and systematically and ideally collaboratively. But there is an extinction burst. Your child will get angry. You see big meltdowns. You see threats. And that is why a lot of times part of the SPACE program is crisis planning. Who am I going to call if there's a crisis? Who am I going to call, or what am I going to do if they're threatening to harm themselves or other people? Depending on the severity of your child's situation, you have to have a crisis plan in place before you do those things. And that is because there is an extinction burst and it's not pretty. Now, another thing that OCD will do is it'll do what I call going on the run. And so let's say you're targeting contamination and your child's doing all these exposures on contamination and they're learning how to reduce their hand washing. And maybe in the office, they're purposely touching things that OCD has deemed contaminated. And all of a sudden, they are telling you all the things they did that day. And they're narrating all the things and they're wondering, was that bad? Am I a bad person because I think I did this? And I said this today, or I thought this today, is that? And you're like, what is going on here? OCD, when it's on the run, will change themes. And that is why it's so important for parents to understand all themes of OCD and not just the one that's showing up for your child in this moment. Because OCD is the most heterogeneous disorder I've ever seen. It looks so vastly different in different people. Now, once you've been treating OCD for 2 decades, you can spot OCD a mile away because OCD does have a playlist and it has its top favorite OCD themes, and they're not, once you know them all and you've been around OCD for a while, it's not original. I have yet to hear something that I haven't heard before with OCD. It might show up in a little bit of a different way, but the themes are all pretty much the same. OCD has a playlist of common themes, and as you know, in a society, we just name those themes. We give them little subtype names to categorize them. But OCD is all OCD. But we say that and then we miss the new theme. And that's why I'm an advocate of understanding what the themes are. I think it's okay to label themes. The risky part is getting tunnel vision and being like, I only want to know about contamination OCD, or I only want to know about moral OCD. Well, you better know all about all the different themes, because you're going to be wondering, why is my child asking me if they're a good person? And then you're going to think, we're just making such great progress on OCD. They barely do any contaminations anymore, or not contaminate. They barely do any washing anymore, and their contamination OCD seems so much better. All the while, they are asking you for constant compulsive reassurance on a new theme, on moral OCD. The intrusive thought that I may turn into a bad person, or I might have done bad things. And you're clueless. You have no idea, because you thought OCD meant contamination, or you thought OCD meant hand washing. And now your child's compulsively telling you all the things they did that may or may not be wrong, and you have no idea what's happening because you haven't educated yourself. That is why I have courses to educate parents, because I feel like in under 3 hours, you're not going to miss anything anymore because you know all the themes. And so OCD will shift. There's moral OCD, there's harm OCD, there's symmetry OCD, there's just right OCD, there's sexual orientation OCD, there is contamination OCD, there's disgust OCD, there is, did I say symmetry OCD? There is existential OCD, there's emetophobia, the fear of throw up, which often goes into the OCD category. There are so many different themes, and that's just at the top of my head. I'm sure I'm missing a million, but I just want to highlight that because there are so many different themes that look so vastly different, and OCD will morph and shift. Parents get discouraged when this happens because they think, oh my gosh, what is the point, right? We were working on contamination OCD, we're making progress, and now, boom, he's got moral OCD. And so I can't get traction on this disorder. It's not true. OCD, when it feels like it's losing a battle, will just pivot and it will find a different thread to pull. And so it's important for us to understand that just because a new topic pops up doesn't mean that we're not making success. OCD is an octopus. That's why a lot of OCD therapists refer to it as an octopus, because it has many tentacles. The beast is the beast. The beast is OCD. The beast is the glitch in the brain. The beast is, I'm going to give you an intrusive thought or feeling, and I'm going to tell you to do or avoid something to get brief relief, whether that's mental or physical or involving a family member. And as long as you do it, I'm going to grow. That's the beast. That's the full octopus. The flavors, the tentacles will change over time. So you could be making progress and you could be shrinking the octopus, but the octopus is putting up a big fight and it's slapping you with a new tentacle. That doesn't mean that the other tentacle didn't shrink and that the beast itself is getting smaller and weaker. You might not realize that or may not feel that way because you're being distracted, because you're being hit in the head with a new tentacle, which does not feel good. I do have a YouTube video on this and I will link it in the show notes. That is a great video to show your kids if they're feeling discouraged. I talk about the octopus and how changing themes is a common part of the disorder, and even especially when you are making progress. Okay, I want to take a quick break, and then when we get back, I want to talk to you about how you can navigate these hard times when you're doing all the right things and OCD is getting louder. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
it's helpful for our kids to hear it from this like third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of like holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was like the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do like the exposures. Before it was like really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it, so it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com. Welcome back. So before the break, we talked about why OCD gets louder and difficult when you are making progress. But what do we do as parents? That's the ultimate question. The first step is learning to regulate ourselves. When our kids are getting treatment or when we're working on it with our kids, the work within ourselves is really important as well. That's why I created the Anchor series on how to be an effective anchor. Because as parents, if we don't learn how to anchor ourselves, ground ourselves, stay calm in the storm, these are bumpy times for us as well. They're still bumpy, to be honest, but they're not going to be as bumpy if you've learned, 1, why this is happening, 2, you expect it to happen, and 3, you have your own coping skills on how to ground yourself in a sea of chaos. So the Anchor series is over, but I do it every 3 months. No, I do it every 6 months. And so it will be back. If you are a member of the AT Parenting community, you do have access to that in your portal. If you go to the app, our member app, and you go on the tabs, go to on-demand courses, it's actually in there. You'll also find the Space Study Guide course in there. You have free access to that, and a whole bunch of actual courses are in there, but my Anchor series is in there as well. We always just update the live component because I do like 3 live classes, and we update those with the latest updated live classes that I did in the last series. So you can go check that out. But learning how to stay calm, it's a really important skill that we really have to hone in when we're on this journey. I find like that's the work, which a lot of us don't think that's the work because we think really the work is just learning what OCD is and then getting our kids into the right therapy. But you're with your child 24/7 and you're going to have to do your own work in how to stay calm. The next one I want to mention is you don't want to get hooked into rationalizing with OCD. And so that is something that happens more when our kids are starting to get help or we're starting to help them. Especially if you're pulling back your enabling of OCD, you're going to get a lot of rationalizing invitations. Like, this isn't OCD. Why do you think this is OCD? Or this isn't helping. How do you think you not wiping down the counter is helping me? It's making me feel really panicky right now. So, or they might say things like, and I actually get a lot of this on my reels. I try not to read too many of the comments once a video that I make goes bigger, because the comments, if I read the comments, I would be there all day responding, because some of the comments are just so ignorant and so many people are so not well. But a lot of people will comment things like, this app's, why would you say that's OCD? That's just smart, right? You just shouldn't do X, Y, and Z. Or that's just being smart and safe. You don't want to get germs on X, Y, and Z. And it's such a disordered way of thinking. I can't get hooked into that kind of stuff. But as a parent, you're going to get that. You're going to get that deep and personal. You're going to get that from your child. And so I wouldn't get hooked in with rationalizing with OCD. well, if you touch this and then you touch that, how is that safe? And once you get hooked in and you're really sucked into the lies of OCD, it's hard to get out of. And you're not going to win the argument. If OCD is debating with you, you're not going to win it if they're really wanting to argue with you and push back. So be careful about getting hooked into the rationalizing. You might say to your child, if they're having a hard time, you might empathize and you might say something like, I have been told that, it's kind of like a bee's nest. I had a kid in one of my support group calls that we do. We do monthly support group calls in the AT parenting community. And one of the kids had said their therapist had told them this, and I really liked it. I thought it was a really good analogy or metaphor. They were talking about how when you're working on OCD, it's like you're removing a beehive, right? You're trying to get it out of your home, your environment, your space. And when you start moving that beehive, the bees get angry. And so they swarm you. And so it can feel worse before it gets better. I like that metaphor a lot better than the one I normally use, which is kind of gross. And I normally share it with parents more than I share it with kids. But when you get burned, what do you have to do when you get burned? If you get like a 3rd degree, 4th degree burn, they have to scrape your skin off. And so in order for the new growth to come and to heal your skin. And so things get worse before they get better. But I think the exercise metaphor is probably the best one. The bee one's pretty good too for kids. But letting them know, OCD is not going to be happy with this. Or you can say things like, I'm sorry your OCD is going to get really upset. Or, yeah, OCD is not going to be happy that you're doing exposures, and OCD might want to turn up the volume for a little while because you're doing so good. Or you're making such a brave move that OCD is going to try to scare you and get you to go back to doing its business so that it can keep growing. So personifying it if that doesn't upset your child, and externalizing it and talking about how they're being empowered and they're doing things that are crushing OCD, and so OCD is going to have a tantrum about it. That could be good language depending on your child. And so I want to also just cover really quickly, and I forgot to mention, I should have done this at the beginning of the episode, but I do have a handout for this episode. I've been creating handouts if you are new to my podcast. I haven't done that in the past, but I am doing it. I've been doing it for, I don't know, maybe like 6 months. So if you go to natashadaniels.com/handouts, or if you've saved the link, because the easiest way I thought of doing this and setting it up is that you sign up and then it links you to a website. And on that website, we just list all the handouts based on the podcast number. And so this is podcast number 458. So when you sign up and you go to that website, natashadaniels.com/handouts, then when you go to the website, just look for 458. You'll also see all the other handouts I've made. So you might like that. That might be helpful. I recommend bookmarking the website so that you don't have to keep signing up for it. You could just go and refresh the page and you'll see a new one every time I tell you there's another handout. I make a handout for most episodes unless I am really having a rough day and it's a rough week and I'm just trying to get this episode out and I didn't have the time for the handout, which doesn't happen often, but I did do a handout for this one. So you can check that out and print it out, and I have an outline of everything that we talked about today. The last thing I want to end with, though, is how to tell when things are really getting worse and it's not just growing pains because of progress. So I would say if your child is having self-harm, obviously, or suicidal ideation, those are concerning, and that's not part of progress. And that might be things are going too fast, or they're getting, the acuity is increasing, but those are real warning signs to take seriously. Other signs might be a big debilitation. I don't know why I say debilitation. A big decompensation with their ability to function. And so if you're seeing that they are not able to get out of bed and they're not able to eat and they're not able to go to school and, a drastic decline in their ability to function over periods of days and weeks, that's a concern. If you're seeing that they don't want to go back to the therapist and they're really resistant of therapy and they're starting to shut down and they don't want to communicate with you anymore, that also could be a sign that things are going too fast and you have to slow it down. And sometimes OCD will just flare, and it's not because the therapy was bad, or it's not because that you were doing anything that wasn't good. It's a rough disorder, and sometimes the acuity level just increases. And it can increase for all sorts of reasons. It can increase just because it's gonna increase and you have no control over it. Sometimes sickness can make it worse. Sometimes hormone levels can make it worse. Sometimes external stressors or traumas or life situations can make OCD worse. And so there are things that happen that are out of our control that can make it worse. And it's not always because the therapist or you did something wrong. It just can be a perfect storm of something else happened or something triggered. Sometimes with my kids, something in the environment triggered something, and OCD just glommed onto it. And it wasn't something we could prevent. It just was. And so that's something to be aware of as well. So I hope that this helps, because a lot of times what I see is parents quitting therapy or bouncing from different therapists or stopping doing the evidence-based approaches that they were doing at home because they're seeing some growing pains. And again, growing pains are different than what I just described, where those are clear, objective signs of concern. And they bail. They stop doing the things they were taught to do because they say, oh, you know what, my child's having a meltdown about it, or, you know, it switched themes, or they seem more stressed. They're going to seem more stressed because they have to sit with discomfort. And the more we rescue them from having the discomfort, the more we rob them of their ability to learn how to sit with discomfort. So it's a catch-22, because as parents, we don't want to see our kids suffer, but the way out of OCD is through it. And that means you have to learn, and by we, I mean them. They have to learn, and you can't do this for them. They have to learn how to sit with discomfort. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. We don't want to flood them. That's why it should be systematic and slow and follow their pace. But that is the way through this disorder. Well, I hope that you found that helpful. I hope that you're finding my podcast helpful in general. Do follow me on all social media. I am creating reels every single day, or YouTube shorts, whatever you want to call them, or TikToks, depending on where you're consuming my stuff. But they are everywhere at Child OCD Therapist. And so if you're not following me, do follow me, because you will be getting that content every day. And a lot of times I'm showing you what OCD looks like. Sometimes OCD is personified in a black hoodie, and that could be a really good education tool to show your child or teen. And sometimes I'm talking to you as the parent. So if you are enjoying the podcast, don't forget to hit a star and rate it. If you have extra moment and write a review, you know I greatly appreciate that. And to show my gratitude, I always like to end reading one of them. I do want to thank Donna from the UK, who wrote a review. And she wrote, absolutely love this podcast. I only found Natasha recently, but I'm so grateful I did. I wasn't even looking, but somehow scrolled on Instagram one day. I saw her profile and watched. It was like a missing puzzle piece being found. It's like listening to a friend who understands the struggles, is going through the struggles, but knows how to help you. Natasha, thank you so much for what you do. I don't feel the despair and sadness like I did, but now have hope. I cannot thank you enough. Oh, I really appreciate that. And I'm so glad that you stumbled on my stuff and I just popped up in your feed. I mean, that's kind of my ultimate hope, is that I feel like there's so many people out there that just need a little bit of a light to help them understand OCD. Because OCD is not rocket science, but as parents, we are kept in the dark. We're kept in the dark by society, by media, because of the perpetuating of the stereotypes of what OCD is. And so it feels so complicated and so overwhelming, and like where to even start with this. And it's such a debilitating disorder. And there's a very simple path. It's a complicated disorder, but it's not rocket science. And so that is why I do these videos every single day, to help reach those of you out there in the darkness who are like, I don't know what's going on. You'll pop up and you'll see one of my videos and you'll be like, oh my gosh, that's what we're dealing with. And then it gets you on the right path, because then you get to the podcast. Then you start hearing, and the podcast is so much more meaty. It's, this is episode 458. So there's 458 hours. Can you imagine that? Of clinically sound, evidence-based discussions about OCD and the co-occurring issues that come with it. And so I'm glad that that's working, because that is my ultimate hope. And I'm glad that you're here, Donna. And so if you write a review, maybe I'll be saying hello to you next time. I hope that you find the sparkle in everything you do. I'll talk to you next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.